Welcome, fellow explorers. My name is Christian Alexandersen, and this is Hemlocks to Hellbenders, a podcast highlighting Pennsylvania's parks, forests, and great outdoors. Here in Pennsylvania, it's hard to throw a pinecone without hitting a hunter or fisherman. Gun-toting, camo-clad men and women are common sights during the hunting season, and it's not unusual to see hundreds of fishermen out at freshly sucked ponds when the season kicks off. But there's another breed of outdoor sportsmen that are often forgot about. Unlike the millions of hunters and fishermen in the United States, they number less than 200,000. They hunt their prey not with rods and reels or bows and guns, but with traps. This episode is all about Pennsylvania's furtakers, what they trap, why they trap, and the state of the hobby here in Pennsylvania. I'm excited to welcome Dan Lynch to the podcast. Dan is a member of the Pennsylvania Trappers Association. Dan, thanks for joining the program.
Thanks for inviting me.
How'd you first get involved in trapping?
I first got involved in trapping probably when I was about 12. I had my dad wasn't a big trapper or anything, but he did tell me about trapping when he was in elementary school, middle school, and it kind of got me interested. And so the first opportunity that I had to get a couple of traps, I think they were probably like number 0 long springs, tiny little traps. I did it and probably caught my first muskrat that first year, and I've been hooked ever since.
What is it about trapping that appeals to you?
So I think the thing that, I think about that a lot. I think the thing that appeals to me and to a lot of trappers is probably just to be actively involved in kind of wildlife management in our state. Through regulated trapping, we can be active participants in wildlife management, which is kind of cool. Instead of just talking about it, you're actually get involved. It allows us also, trappers, and myself obviously included, it allows me to help other people. Most of my trapping is done when people contact me about what they perceive as a nuisance critter, whether it's something that is eating chickens. I mean, I love free range chickens because that gets me lots of places to trap. And so helping others and just being an active participant. I get to spend a lot of time outdoors observing things that a lot of people don't get to do. Hunters can do it, hikers can do it, but when you're trapping, you're trying to find specific tracks and trails and scat and sign that you really have to pay attention to. So I just enjoy that aspect of it.
What kind of animals can be trapped here in Pennsylvania?
So in Pennsylvania, there are 13 furbearers. We call them furbearers, furbearer species that you are allowed to trap. If you look in the Game Commission Digest, there's 16 listed as furbearers. 2 of them we don't have. I'm not really sure why they're listed. We don't have badgers. We don't have marten, although that's a subject we could talk about because the Game Commission is interested in reintroducing marten to Pennsylvania. But we don't have those 2 right now. And the third one is porcupine. And porcupine can be hunted, but not trapped. So there's 13 out of those 16 that you can trap. They're the coyote, red fox and gray fox, weasel, mink, fisher, otter, bobcat, possum, raccoon, beaver, muskrat, and skunk. Those are the 13.
Do you hunt and fish as well, or do you just trap?
No, I do all of it. I hunt for just about everything out there, archery, gun, you name it. I also fish for everything in Pennsylvania and a lot of other states. And I camp, my wife and I camp and hike, and she actually is an active participant as well. We do a lot of this stuff together. But yeah, I'm really into pretty much everything outdoors.
You want to control all the wildlife populations.
Well, sort of. Maybe not control them, but be an active participant for sure. Yeah.
Take me on a typical day of trapping. What's involved? What do you consider a successful day?
Okay, well, so you kind of have to decide what, to answer that question. You have to kind of decide what you're going to go trapping for because it's completely different. So I'll just give you an idea for a typical day if I was going on a fox on my fox line. So if I've already started trapping, okay, so it's not day one. Day one is, a lot of prep. There's a lot of prep that goes into getting ready to go trapping, getting permissions, all that kind of good stuff. I visit pretty much all of my permissions, maybe once or maybe twice prior to actually going there to see if there's been any changes in the habitat. Farmers planting different crops, different places, and basically just looking for sign. I mean, there's no point trying to catch a fox if there's no sign of fox, there. So a typical day after I've already started would be the evening before. I would make sure that in my truck or whatever vehicle you're going to take, I have a truck, that I would have bait and lure, some extra traps. I like to try to keep things as organized. I mean, I'm not retentive about it, but I like to keep things as organized as possible. It makes things go more quickly on the line and be a little bit more efficient. And it was different. It's a little different now that I'm retired. Prior to being retired, I did all of this stuff in the dark before I would go to work. So I would start at 3 o'clock in the morning, get up in the morning, probably leave the house by 3:30, and to get back by 6, so I could take a shower and go to work. But basically, I'm going out to different properties, and I try to set them up so that I don't have to walk very far from my vehicle if I can. Animals are lazy like we are. They're going to try to take trails and roads. So there's really no point in parking and then walking half a mile unless you have to. So if I can drive right up to the spot where I'm going to put my traps, that's perfect. Many times you can then actually see the trap if you're close enough without actually getting out. So I don't have to leave any sign or smell of me out there. Animals are used to vehicles. They're used to the smell of tires and all that kind of good stuff. It doesn't mean anything to them, but I prefer to not have a lot of my smell right next to the trap if possible. So if I have a fox, I'll dispatch the fox. I will remake the set. And the set, so I use the word set 2 different ways. One is to actually set a trap, to physically set a trap, to open up the jaws and set it. And then once the trap is placed in the ground or in the water, wherever you're trapping, and maybe you cover it up with grass or dirt or whatever, that is called a set. So, everything there is a set. But sometimes when I'm talking to people about trapping, I just use the word set, and they're like, I thought you just said you're setting a trap. I'm like, yeah, I am. So, and then I will check all the traps, dispatch any critters I have, remake the sets, and just be on to the next spot. And a typical day might be 6 to 10 stops, 6 to 10 properties in a day. And probably on my line, probably 2 to 3 hours a day, including driving. I try to make sure that my travels go in a loop, so it kind of brings me back, so I'm not going all the way out trying to backtrack, things like that. There isn't really money to be made in trapping, so I don't want to drive too much farther than I need to come back. So that's not why we do it. I guess maybe I'd say in the mid 70s, late 70s, it was what we called the fur boom, and foxes brought a lot of money, not skinned, like whole in the carcass. And by a lot of money, I'd say between $70 and $80. At the local, I'm in Berks County, the local Berks fur sale that we had about 2 weeks ago, they averaged, I think, $4.50. So that's if you do the work. So, I'm jumping ahead, but you catch the animal, you have to dispatch the animal, you have to skin the animal, stretch the animal, and then you get $4.50. So it's sometimes people have the misconception that, oh boy, these guys are making all kinds of money. Well, they haven't done that yet, because I'm probably losing money the minute I leave my house. So that's not why we do it.
Like any good hobby, you have to lose money.
Yeah. I've rarely considered trapping a hobby or a sport. It's definitely more active participation in wildlife management. Truly, it is. It's to me way more than a hobby. I mean, I actually take people out with me to maybe they just ride along for a day or two just to see what's all involved, because it's not just the actual trapping and going out and doing it, but then any of the animals that you get, there's a lot of work involved in prepping those pelts, depending on if you're going to use the glands for making lures, going to clean the skulls to either sell or give away. And then in some of those animals, we eat them. Beavers, muskrat, things like that. They're actually really good. So, there's a lot of work involved in it.
Is there a particular animal you like to trap?
Every single one. There isn't one that I dislike. I do, I water trap. So I trap for raccoons and muskrat and mink and beaver and land trap. Everything in Pennsylvania that you can trap, I have trapped except for a weasel. I haven't really had a lot of sign of, I think I've only ever seen one in the wild. So that's one animal I haven't gotten. And I haven't gotten an otter yet either. So there's otters. The three animals that you're only allowed one per trapper per year is an otter, a bobcat, and a fisher. And I've harvested a few fisher and a few bobcat, but not an otter yet. So that's something that I'm still working on.
Now, I know you can hunt on state park and state forest land. Can you also trap on public land and things like that here in Pennsylvania?
You can. There might be places on state parks or state forest land that might be off limits to trapping and hunting just due to a lot of human traffic, right next to trails or buildings and things like that. But on most state game lands that the Game Commission owns and state parks and state forests that DCNR owns, you're allowed to hunt and trap. If you aren't, then they put specific signs up telling you that you can't. There's still what we call a safety zone. There's a safety zone in hunting and a safety zone in trapping, distance between a building and where you can place a trap. In Pennsylvania trapping, the safety zone is 150 yards or 450 feet, which is similar to gun hunting in Pennsylvania.
What kind of misconceptions do people have about fur trapping?
Yeah, there's a lot of misconceptions out there. I would say that one of the misconceptions is that you can do it at any time of the year. They don't realize that what I'm talking about is regulated trapping. So it's not just you just go trap and do whatever you want whenever you want. It's actually a very short season. It normally comes in mid-October, and let's say for a lot of the land species like coyote and fox, and it's done in late February. Okay, so some of the other animals are only like November to January, muskrats and mink, and then beaver starts the third week in December and goes till March 30th this year. So it's designed to make sure that the animals that we're trapping are not dependent on their the female anymore. Okay, the adult female, they can go on their own. So if you were to trap the female, the young would still be able to take care of themselves. And it's also designed to trap the animal when the fur is at what we call prime. So if you're going to utilize the fur to make clothing or something like that, it wouldn't be good in the summertime. It's only good in fall and late winter. So that's the reason. So that's a huge misconception that people think that you can trap anytime you want. Another would be that you can trap any animal. I had already said there's only 13 that you can trap. They picture a foothold trap. First off, lots of people call it a leg hold trap. It isn't a leg hold trap. Okay, it is a foothold trap. It's not designed to catch the animal by the leg. It's designed to catch the animal by the foot. And you choose the size of the trap depending on the size of the animal that you're going after. So if you picture a dog, if a lot of people have a dog, and if you've ever messed around with the dog's foot, like when they're sleeping, they're always occasionally put your finger in between the pads and the dog twitches his foot. Well, those pads are what are caught at the jaw, so that the animal simply just can't slide the foot pads through the jaws. And the foothold trap is a live restraining device. It doesn't kill the animal. It's just being held by the foot. Biologists, state agencies, and trappers have used foothold traps for many years to reintroduce animals to different parts of the state, or to give them to reintroduce them to a state where they don't have them anymore. And they use foothold traps to do it. So it doesn't break the foot or anything like that. It simply holds the animal. So that's a huge misconception. Sometimes they think that trappers are, they hate animals. It couldn't be any more opposite of that. We actually realize that we want to be humane and ethical in harvesting animals. So if you have to check your traps once every 36 hours by law. Most trappers check it once every 24 hours or even less. You don't want the animal to be in the trap any longer than it needs to, because you want to catch another animal. So you want to get that animal out. A lot of the animals are nocturnal in nature simply because there's so many humans out. So they would be a little bit more stressed to be caught out in a field during the daylight. So you want to get them out of there. And a lot of people work. So they're going to go either before or after work to remove them. So those are some huge misconceptions that people have about trapping.
I think one of the areas too has to do with the traps in terms of like giant steel claws,
Sure.
like ripping off limbs. I was thinking about that in preparation for the interview, and I was thinking, where have I seen that? Like, why do I consider that to be what trappers do?
I'll tell you.
And I actually think it's cartoons.
It's either cartoons or it's Walt Disney. Okay. If you've ever seen the movie The Fox and the Hound, okay, most people have. Most people have not gone with an actual trapper, but they have seen the movie The Fox and the Hound. So if that's your impression of what a trap is, Disney did a great job of marketing. They did. It sticks in people's heads. But what I always tell people is, in that movie, by the way, in that movie, every time the trapper is in the movie, the oboe is playing, which is the same thing as Peter and the Wolf. Every time the wolf is mentioned, it's the oboe. So they did a good job with the music, like, oh, it's a bad person. Not that oboes are bad, but they made it sound that way. That trapper also used 20-some traps with teeth on them in the middle of the road, and that fox ran completely through and didn't get caught. As trappers, we use one trap. It doesn't have teeth. They're not allowed to have teeth, and it wouldn't make any sense anyhow. Teeth would cut into the skin, possibly break the bone. You wouldn't even have the animal. So that's a huge misconception. When I show people a trap many times for the first time, whether it's a kid or a high school student, college student, or adult, they were like, oh, I didn't know what that is. Like, yeah, because you're going by, quote, a bear trap or something like that. And, even bear traps with teeth, and there is only one state you can trap bears anymore, and it's not with the trap, it's with a snare, a foothold snare, and that's in Maine. So, but the traps with teeth would cut skin. It wouldn't make any sense. Although all our trap jaws are flat, and sometimes they're a little bit wider than you would think. And the idea is the more wide of the inside jaw that touches the foot, it provides more support. So you just picture if a pencil was as thick as the jaw, but you put two pencils on top of each other, you would have more support going in there. It's hard to do it on a podcast because I'm not really showing you a trap, but that's the concept of it. And I know you were going to talk about traps, but I probably, I can talk a little bit about how things have changed with traps over time. There's been a lot of changes.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah, so we have what we call modifications. So there's many different modifications on traps. And here's what's interesting. They've all been designed by trappers. Okay, it's not like it's even trap companies normally were started by a trapper, almost every single one. And the idea was, how do we make a better trap to hold the animal so it's there in the morning, it's not injured, and we are successful and it's efficient. So by making sure the jaws are flatter and thicker, that's a big thing. Sometimes they put rubber strips inside the jaws. So they call it a soft catch or rubber jaw trap. People have this misconception that it's two Nerf balls coming together. It's not. It's a hard piece of rubber, but it is rubber. In some states, that's the only type of trap that you can use. And again, those states changed those laws over a misconception, like it's two pieces of rubber and it has to be steel coming together or it wouldn't hold the animal. I mean, a coyote can be 40 pounds. A coyote will pull out of two pieces of rubber that don't have steel on the outside, for sure. The other things is that lots of traps have a chain attached to them. All traps have a chain attached to them. Older style traps have the chain attached to one side or the other. More modern traps have the chain attached to the very center. It's called the base plate, the part underneath there, and it's at the very center of the trap. And the idea here is, again, this is a podcast, I can't show you the trap, but if you picture a foot in the trap pulling directly away from the chain as opposed to pulling from one side or the other, it's much stronger in the center of the trap. And that provides a holding power so that the animal can't get away. The chain then, many chains, usually when you buy a trap now, it has at least two swivels in the chain. Some trappers, I myself, put a third one in. I cut the chain and I put a third one in there. The swiveling action allows the animal to move around and around, and it can't really kink the chain. Chains are important too. Most chains are single link to single link, as opposed to swing set chain. If you picture a swing set chain, it's 2 links to 2 links to 2 links. If you were to take that swing set chain and swing it around, it will kink and get shorter and shorter. Single loop chain won't. It stays one loop attached to one loop. So there's lots of different modifications to chains. The traps also sometimes they have 2 jaws. They all have 2 jaws, but sometimes they have another jaw underneath it. And the idea is you clog up the space between the bottom of the jaw and the pan. The pan is the thing that the animal steps on. And that way an animal can't get in there to like chew on the trap or anything like that. So a second jaw, like 2 jaws on one jaw underneath each other, that's another modification. And so there's lots of different, types of modifications, and they've all been done by trappers to make a better trap. And so I tell people, if you're going to go to yards, you want to get into trapping, you're going to go to a yard sale, you might be better off going to a trapping supply place or talking to a trapper and starting out with better traps to begin with. You want the animal to be there in the morning. You don't want just some hair where they pulled out of a weak trap. Speaking of that, I never put my hands in traps to show people it doesn't hurt, because that's false. It does hurt. Like, I don't need to stand in front of a car and get hit to go, I wonder if that hurts. I'm pretty sure it hurts, okay? My traps are, for the most part, I work them every year to make sure that they're in good working condition. I clean them off after every trapping season, and then I dip them or dye them so that they don't rust. It's not so much to camouflage from the animal, because they're buried underneath grass or dirt. They don't see them. But I do make sure that they're in good working order. And traps snapping on your hand is going to hurt. It's fast. It's 2 springs putting 2 pieces of metal together. But I've caught all of my fingers and my thumbs in traps when I wasn't paying attention. None of them have ever been broken. There are big beaver body gripping traps that if you got your hand or arm in there, it could break, no doubt. It's got to hold a 50-pound beaver. So you got to be careful. But I don't put my fingers and go, gee, that doesn't hurt. Because if you see people do that, many times those are very weak springs. And I'm not trying to trick somebody, it's going to hurt. But it's kind of like if you've ever taken a rubber band and wrapped it multiple times around the tip of your finger. Like, I don't know why you would do that, but a lot of people have. But it gets kind of numb after a little bit. The difference between a trap and a rubber band is rubber band goes completely around your finger, cuts all the blood supply off eventually. Like, you don't want to fall asleep after that happens. But a trap leaves blood going on 2 sides of your finger or the animal's foot. So it's not like it's going to fall off if you let the animal go or anything like that. It's different than a rubber band, but it does become a little bit more numb. And so the animal doesn't know it's a trap, but the animal knows that he can't get away. You know what I mean? So I try not to fake it or lie to people and say that doesn't hurt, because, well, yeah, it would.
Now, I think we've been talking mostly about footholds. Do you also use snares?
I do. So there's 2 types of snares. So the word snare is, in Pennsylvania, is used for either beavers or otter, and it must be set partially in the water. Okay. And the other type, like a snare, is called a cable restraint. And a cable restraint is made from the exact same materials that a snare is. The cable restraint has one more device on it. It's a little nut that's pinched on the loop of the snare that only allows it to open so far. The idea is you don't need a giant loop to catch a fox or a coyote, but if the loop was too big and you made a mistake and set it in a pasture, you don't want to catch a sheep or a cow or a horse. So for the most part, they're exactly the same. They're 3/32-inch diameter aircraft cable, and the snare can only be used for otter and beaver and can only be set in the water. And the others, the cable restraint, is to catch the animal alive. So to do it properly, first you have to go and take a cable restraint certification. You can either do it online or in person. And then you have to carry that little permit with you during the cable restraint season, which is normally the day after Christmas till the end of fox and coyote season, which the end of February. And the cable restraint is set a loop, a specific size, and the loop at the bottom of the loop can only be so far off the ground. So it's no lower than 6 inches. The idea is that we don't want to catch skunks, feral cats, things like that are walking with their heads real low. It has to be up at the size that a fox or a coyote would be walking through. And the idea there is the animal is caught. He goes through the loop, it closes on his head, and he can go around in a circle. It has to be anchored to the ground, but you don't want him to entangle around anything like a tree or a rock or a log, because it could, choke him down at that point. Otherwise, he's going to be there in the morning, and then you, as a trapper, decide if you're going to dispatch him or let him go. And the idea there is we didn't want to catch like somebody's dog and have it choked. Your dog's been on a leash before. I've caught my dog. I had a yellow lab, and I would set the snares in the yard, throw the ball to catch him just to see what would happen. And he would get caught, and he'd be just sitting there like, what's up with that? And I would just go and unhook the thing and let him go. But it's designed so that if the animal gets caught, it will be alive. So it's a live restraining device.
You've spoken about dispatching animals when you go to get your traps. What does that mean? Kind of how is that done?
Yeah, so the most humane way to put an animal down or dispatch it is with a .22, a rifle or a handgun, and shoot the animal in the head. Basically, that's how it's quickly done. Might be a little bit of blood, where you're trapping there, but it's not like people are like, oh, I don't want any blood on the ground. Well, you're going after predators. Blood means nothing to them. If anything, it could be an attractant. So we want to do it quick, and you're also not trying to mess up the hide of the animal if that's the whole point of you getting it to sell the hide or whatever. But that's normally how it's dispatched. If it's in a live restraining device like a cable restraint or a foothold trap. If it's in a body gripping trap in the water, it has to be set in the water. An animal like a mink, muskrat, beaver is going to swim through it, and they will be dead when you get there. It's very, very quick. And that's why we can't set those on land, because you don't want to get a non-target animal that would run through a body gripping trap on land. In Pennsylvania, that's unlawful.
Can you tell me about the Pennsylvania Trappers Association?
Sure. I'm a member of the Trappers Association. It's most states have a Trappers Association, and in Pennsylvania, we're the largest of all the 50 states. I checked with our furbearer biologist, Tom Keller, in Pennsylvania with the Game Commission, and in 22-23, the Game Commission sold 46,443 fur taker licenses. Now, that doesn't mean that there's 46,443 trappers, because probably half of them buy a fur taker license to go predator hunting as opposed to trapping. Those numbers give, so about half of that, 23,000, something like that, are actual trappers. Some of those trappers may do both. I mean, I do both. I predator hunt and I trap. But many of those people probably are just predator hunting, about half of them. He had told me that in like 2021, when we had the COVID thing, they had called it a COVID bump. We were up to 50,000 fur taker licenses, which is very high. And in the 2 years after that, it's gone down to about 46. But we're still on track for a trend that has been increasing for 40 plus years is on fur taker licenses in Pennsylvania, which is awesome. We'd certainly like, to have all those people be part of the association. Obviously they're not, but it would be good. Some people just don't know we have an association, so I'm glad we're doing things like this, that we do have a Trappers Association, and anybody that reads it, even if you're not a trapper and you want to just support wildlife management, conservation wildlife management, the PTA is a great organization to do that. We try to do conservation type things, and conservation is the wise use of something. So we're not we're an organization that is actively involved. Okay, so I said that in the beginning, but to me, that's really important. We support the Pennsylvania Game Commission in the use of science to manage wildlife. That's what we're interested in. We're super happy with the biologists that the Game Commission has, and we support pretty much everything that they're trying to do to make sure that the the animals that were indigenous to Pennsylvania, that if for example, like, there was a time when we didn't really have very many fishers or beaver or otter, but through scientific management and the fact that we had them before, you have to have the right habitat. But if we have the right habitat, why wouldn't we want to bring back native species? And then, I'm sort of getting to this other animal called the American marten that we're supporting the Game Commission in trying to reintroduce them back into Pennsylvania. So we think that's a good idea. The trappers also help by filling out surveys each year to give an idea of the animals that are being harvested. Also in areas where, I'll give bobcats and fishers and otters as an example. If trappers catch them in areas that they aren't allowed to harvest them, in management units that they're not, they will contact their local game warden to let them know that, they caught this animal and they released it, or they may need help releasing it. Releasing a bobcat is not the easiest thing in the world. They're not like happy to have a person that close to them. So sometimes they need some help. But all that data goes back to the Game Commission, letting them know that, hey, maybe these populations are increasing in wildlife management units in addition to the ones that we can harvest them in, and in hopes that we might be able to increase the management units. So the trappers actively try to help the Game Commission with that kind of data, which is hard to do when you don't have enough, let's say, a lot of biologists or technicians going out there doing it. You've got trappers in all 67 counties that are doing that kind of thing. So that's a little bit about the PTA. One thing that's really important is that we have 12 different districts that we divide the state in. So we've got an awesome website, patrappers.com, and then a really active Facebook page. So there's all kinds of stuff that is being put on the Facebook page that's pertinent to trapping and the association.
How would you describe your members?
So I'd say that the members are getting more diverse. Okay, we're trying. We've always been trying to bring a lot of youth into the organization because it's a little different than fishing. Let's say. I mean, fishing. I can give you. You could be a pretty young kid. I give you a fishing rod, and you could go down to a local creek or pond and pretty much figure it out on your own. It's a little more difficult in knowing how to set traps, where to get the traps. It's not like you go to Walmart and buy trapping stuff. They don't have it. There's not a big enough demand. If there was, they would have it at Walmart, but they don't. So that part's difficult. You almost need to go along with somebody who does it. And like I said, we've got, forget how many million, 12.5 million people in the state, something like that, and 46,000 furtaker licenses. 23,000 of them are trappers. How do you connect with the 23,000 people out there? It's not that good, So I would say that we're always trying to expand our youth, but also trying to expand more women in trapping as well. So we're trying to promote anytime there's an organization that wants to do women in the outdoors type things. If the PTA can help sponsor something, that's what we're interested in doing. So for a fact, we have trappers in all 67 counties, but, I already said total fur taker trappers might be somewhere around, half of that 46, something like that. So I would imagine my age, we have a lot of trappers my age. We need more younger trappers.
Teddy Roosevelt once said, "In a civilized and cultivated country, wild animals only continue to exist at all when preserved by sportsmen." How is the Pennsylvania Trappers Association and its members involved in conservation efforts?
Well, I think one of the ways that we are involved in the conservation efforts is, like I said before, really helping to support the Pennsylvania Game Commission and their efforts to make sure that we have good regulated trapping seasons for all those 13 species. Hopefully, maybe reintroduce martens, and 15 years down the road, there might be a trapping season for martens. Who knows? If they take, I have no idea if that's going to work, but we support that conservation effort in our state. Trying to make sure that all of our members are ethical and responsible and follow all the rules and regulations is really important too. When we're out in the field, if we see somebody doing something wrong, whether you're a hunter or a fisherman or a trapper, You can't just go, hey, well, boy, that's a real shame. You got to step forward sometimes and do the right thing. Either go tell that person right away that, say you see them trapping too close to a building, or maybe take something that wasn't in season and literally walking out. There's not enough game wardens out there that they're going to see all of that. But trappers and hunters and fishermen or hikers, just people outdoors, if you see something, say something about it. So I think that's kind of an important conservation effort. Most of the hunters and trappers and fishermen in Pennsylvania are doing the right thing. There's probably a small percentage that aren't, but those people can give a black eye to a lot of different other organizations by, that's what makes the headlines. Not all of the successful trapping and all that kind of good stuff. You don't really hear about it, but sometimes somebody does something stupid and that makes the headlines. So we got to cut down on that kind of thing.
It can also be somebody who's just not educated enough. Like maybe they passed their tests and maybe they're doing the right things, but they just didn't know, or they forgot, or they're new to the hobby. So they might not necessarily know. And having somebody who's more experienced with them, or, participating in the hobby near them, can really help those people out.
Sure. And when we get together at our district meetings, I'm in District 11, which is Berks, in that area, and Lancaster and that kind of stuff. We try to make sure we bring somebody new to the meetings, or make sure we take them out on the line and get them interested, so they know exactly what it takes to do it and to do it correct. The one thing that we have today that we didn't have 50 years ago is the internet. You can learn an awful lot, but you can't necessarily become proficient on the internet. You actually have to go out and do it. So the internet is really good. Sometimes, however, even magazines and things, but sometimes what's lawful in another state is not lawful in this. So we're highly regulated. We have a lot of regulations in Pennsylvania. And that's one thing that, that folks don't really understand. They think that the animals that we're trapping, let's say, might be endangered or threatened. Couldn't be farther from the truth. None of the animals that we trap in Pennsylvania are endangered or threatened. We actually have a lot of all of those species. Otherwise, we wouldn't trap them.
What are the benefits of trapping?
Some of the benefits to trapping, we can, as trappers, we try to manage species so that they are sustainable. Okay, so not at all species, but in some species, if you have high populations of them in close quarters and they get some sort of disease, it will spread quickly. So and it's not all species, but I can talk about like raccoons and red fox. When you have a high population of them, if you end up with an incidence of mange or distemper or rabies, the things that we take our pets and get them inoculated for, those wild animals don't have. They don't get vaccinations for distemper and that kind of stuff, but that can happen in a wild species. So trappers help to maintain that in some areas by bringing down the numbers, so that if that happens, you don't have an overpopulation that all of a sudden a scourge of distemper comes through and just wipes a huge population out at one time. In addition to that, when those animals have rabies or distemper or things like that, and they get around people or pets, that can be transmitted to domestic animals too. So that's one thing it does. If you're a farmer or a rancher, or you just have what I had said before, free range chickens, I always love that, because I always think, if you really like your chickens, you might want to keep them in a pen, but that's okay. When we like to eat chickens, and so does every fur bearer out there that can catch one. But doing that sometimes helps, because people don't know what to do. They have a raccoon coming in, a raccoon or a mink can go in your chicken pen and kill everything in one night. So those kinds of things will help people. We also try and benefit endangered species in some cases, not always, but sometimes there are like species like plovers, piping plovers, critters, birds primarily that nest along beaches. They have high predation on them. Coyotes, mink, raccoons, skunks eating those eggs. So actually trapping some of the common species can actually help some endangered species as well. So those are some of the things that benefit, people from trapping. And obviously, some animals, There can be a fur value as well. I don't want to skip that. That's what some people will do. They'll trap and they will sell fur. I many times get things tanned and sell it on eBay, or I give it away as gifts. I give landowners things for allowing me to trap on their property. Then maybe I give them a tan fox pelt or something like that. And so again, I'm spending more money than I'm getting back in, but I enjoy doing what I do. So that's one of the ways that I keep doing it.
Dan, how would you describe the popularity of trapping in Pennsylvania? Is it growing?
Yeah, I would say that the popularity of trapping actually is growing. As a matter of fact, I was just at an auction last night where it was advertised this guy was selling all kinds of traps and furs and everything else, and I was surprised the number of people there. I'm sure they weren't all trappers, but it's the appeal of it. People like to have a tan pelt or a trap hanging in their house. It's kind of outdoorsy, even though they may not even know how to set the trap or have never even thought of using it. It's kind of cool. And I do lots of programs in schools where we, bring in a fur bearer and show them how to skin it, or do a necropsy, just show them. And sometimes they're amazed. They're amazed how big a beaver is. I mean, beavers are huge. And, like they're our largest rodent. They're related to the mouse running around in your garage. And until you actually see one up close and you see all the different characteristics of that beaver, that the adaptations, webbed hind feet with a split toenail for combing their fur, and huge incisor teeth, they don't really know a whole lot about it until they actually get to witness it. So I say the popularity, for sure, by looking at the fur taker sales, is going up.
Let's say I want to get into fur trapping.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't grow up with it. It's not my family. My dad never taught me. Who should I reach out to? How can I safely get involved into it?
Okay, so I got a couple different answers for that. One is definitely go on our website, patrappers.com, and then hit the Facebook thing and page down. If you go on our website and you hit districts and click on that, there's a drop down and it'll show you a map of the state, and it'll show you, which district you're in. We also have a list of all the district directors, emails and their phone numbers. Call them, say, hey, I'm interested in learning about trapping. Is there anybody who could spend some time and show me? And yes, there will be in every single district. Here's something else that's kind of cool. This summer in Shippensburg, and I get the dates here, June 15th through the 17th, we have what we call the rendezvous. So it's an old-fashioned term. If you ever watched Jeremiah Johnson on movie on TV, they go to rendezvous. Well, we still have a rendezvous every year. It's our state convention, and it's going to be out in Shippensburg. And there'll be, I don't know, a couple hundred vendors, a couple hundred tailgaters selling things off the back of their vehicles, and then all kinds of free demos, demonstrations of everything from trapping, everything from a weasel to a beaver, as well as skinning them, showing up how to put up the fur. There'll be things on how to make things with your fur. Like, so you want to make a hat, you want to make mittens or something like that. That is an awesome thing to go to. Plus, each one of those districts, I think there's 7 of them listed right now, have free trapping weekends. So you go there and it might be 15 to 20 people, and you learn all about trapping for a day and a half or 2 days. And it's free. We're trying to, it used to be a long, long time ago, nobody wanted to tell you anything. It was their secret. Well, there really aren't a whole lot of secrets anymore. It's you got to go out and actually do it. You can learn everything you can on the internet, but you still didn't actually get your hands dirty. You literally need to get your hands dirty. And these districts all provide this free trapping instruction, which is really cool. So on our website has people's names and emails to contact, no matter where you are in the state. Here's something also that I think is kind of cool. We did talk about a couple of the key messages that I like to talk about trapping is that, the animals aren't endangered. But our agency, the Game Commission, and all the other state agencies get involved with these things called BMPs, best management practices. And there's best management practices for all kinds of businesses, things that, have nothing to do with trapping, but trapping has them as well. And what we do, what our state does, is they get involved with taking different types of traps and testing them to see what is most efficient for the different critters that you're going after. And here's what's interesting. There are BMPs on 22 different species in the United States. So we can only trap 13 of those in Pennsylvania, but in the United States and Canada, there are 22 different species that you can trap. For instance, we don't have badgers around here, but they're out west. We don't have wolverines around here, but they're in Alaska. So there's a best management practice for all of them. Here's what's cool. These BMPs are recommendations. They're not, it doesn't say, the Game Commission isn't going to say, you, Christian, you must go buy this size trap to use for this animal. But let's say you didn't know. You asked, like, I don't know anything about it. I want to know what trap should I get? I have no idea. Well, these BMPs, and they're on the internet. You can download them. They're free. They will tell you that these 20 different traps were tried for raccoons. And there's the whole, like a rubric telling you how they scored. And then you get to decide. You can make an informed decision. That's the important part about BMPs. They did all the work. You get to be informed as opposed to just going to a yard sale and buying whatever trap is there. I don't recommend it. I just don't recommend that at all, because I want you to be part of wildlife management, and BMPs are part of wildlife management. So the information is there. You can download it and you can see exactly what type. Some of those traps are good for multiple animals, both foxes and coyotes. So it's not like you need a specific or a bigger trap necessarily. You could just use the trap that scored the best. For foxes and coyotes, it might be the exact same trap. And so I just wanted to make sure that we talked about them, that the BMPs are really important to trapping and wildlife management. And that would be, in addition to looking at the website, the Facebook page, contacting actual people in our organization, doing some of your own research on BMPs, which are already done. I mean, there was millions of dollars spent on them in both Canada and the United States. And the cool part is everybody who actually did the trapping using those traps were actual trappers. A technician from a state agency who was hired went along with them, and every animal that was caught was dispatched and everything was recorded. Was there any foot damage? And then they did a necropsy on them to internally look and see what kind of, so they really were able to tell what traps were good and what traps weren't as good for each species. So that would be it's kind of a long answer, but that would be my answer, to if you're brand new and you want to do your own research, man, it's out there. It's kind of cool.
Dan, if I'm ever in Berks, you want to go set a string?
You bet. I don't know. Where are you? What county are you in?
I'm in Cumberland County. And funny enough, I saw a flyer for the rendezvous, and I took it. I immediately sent it out to about 25 people, and I said,
"Cool, yes,
sounds like the most
I will
interesting
be there at the rendezvous as well. I'm doing a program on Let's Talk Trapping. I've done it. I did it at the last rendezvous with two other people, and it's how to talk trapping as a trapper, how to talk to people about trapping, things that work and things that don't work. Yeah, it's kind of cool. I'll also be teaching a cable restraint course. You can sign up for a cable restraint course there and take it. And I think it's like $15 or whatever like that just to get the permit. But yeah, that's a good one to go to. And you're welcome to come on my trap line for sure.
Dan, thanks so much for joining the podcast. I appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
I want to thank my guest, Dan Lynch, for joining the podcast. Be sure to visit our website and follow us on Instagram and Facebook for more information about upcoming episodes. This has been Hemlocks to Hellbenders. I'll see you out there. Hosting, production, and editing by Christian Alexandersen. Music by John Sauer. Graphics by Uncle Traveling Matt's Random Expedition.